Guys, every once in a while, we all get to jump on a game, and it kind of makes it for an interesting discussion. I like doing this kind of style. Here, we're checking out Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. We're all at different stages. Steve and I are our main reviewers here. We've had the game for a little bit longer than you guys, Cory and Scott. Right now, I'm currently somewhere in around the 25-hour mark. Steve, how far are you in?
Just a little bit over 10 hours on this one.
Fair enough. And Cory, whereabouts are you?
I'm about the 3-4 hour mark so far in the game.
And Scott, you too.
Likewise, I'm about 3 or 4 hours in. Yeah, somewhere in between.
So this is where it gets interesting because we all have different points of where we are and how further along we are in the game. Sometimes makes a difference, but can you get to that distance? Because Avatar has a slow start. I don't know what you guys thought about this. Scott, where are you at the very beginning of your thoughts here?
Yeah, definitely a slow beginning because I thought, oh, we're going to get into this world. I know it's a co-op game, but the co-op only unlocks at, well, by my estimate, about 3 hours in.
Yeah.
And I think I saw that splash screen, the title, come up at about the 2 hour mark.
Ubisoft.
And that's
Avatar.
yeah, that's where you know you've just started a Ubisoft game. So I'm seeing all the hallmarks that I've come to expect from Ubisoft, but getting into it, I'm just getting lost in the weeds.
Absolutely. What about yourself, Cory?
Well, yeah, you know what? It's one of those things. Avatar is such a huge franchise that this game, I think, is probably one of the biggest games being released at the end of the year here. So there's a lot of anticipation, I think, from all gamers, not just people that are fans of the Avatar franchise. So it's exciting to see that there's been a lot of thought put into this game as far as how it looks. I mean, when you first walk into that kind of Fallout style reveal of Pandora, like you're coming out of the vault kind of thing, and you're taking a look at just kind of how beautiful the whole world really is they've captured it to a T. I kind of said off screen to you guys that it reminded me of when I first got into Hogwarts. Like, you're excited to get into the school and see that world that they create that and is very familiar. So for me, it was exciting to see how good it looked and how good the audio was. But again, like you kind of said at the beginning, guys, is we're going through like maybe 10-15 minutes worth of cut scenes, and I was like, when am I actually going to get to play this game? It took a little bit to really get into it on this one. I think you're rewarded by seeing the world when you first kind of get in and seeing how beautiful it is, and then you get to start to explore everything. And that's where, for me, it started to get a little dicey, was the exploration. And I don't know about you guys that have played this game a little bit longer than we have, but I just found myself getting lost a lot, and that was frustrating for me.
Absolutely. Yes. What about yourself, Steve? Obviously, you and I have had a lot more time together playing this, right? You and I actually played co-op together, which was a highlight for me. But yeah, it was cool. Co-op makes a difference, right? Too.
But I like Cory just said, visually it looks amazing. I mean, I saw the first Avatar film, and they just, it looks like you're watching a movie starting off, and when you get through all the cutscenes, the voice acting is, I thought, it was phenomenally good. It's very believable. You start to believe the characters and the Na'vis, like the tribes and things like that. And Pandora is absolutely amazing. And as Cory just mentioned, after like 15-20 minutes of cutscenes of just getting the premises of what's going on and going out into this beautiful world, I found it hard to connect with this game to start off with because of the pace.
Absolutely. That's the biggest problem. I think for me, it actually opened up after the 10-hour mark. That was, I'm like, you have to be 10 hours into this thing? So then my question comes back to you guys, Scott and Cory. Are you going to stick with it?
In my case, I'll have to answer this one strongly because I will commit to it. I will see this one through. And I know I'm going to enjoy it, but I have to agree with you. There's a bit of a hang-up. Trying to get my foot in the door. I noticed right in the beginning, maybe my first observation, not necessarily a gripe, was that there's a lot of cliches happening. It's following through the normal paces of a movie, and that makes a lot of sense for some regard. But I'm getting locked up in the cutscenes watching the mouth move,
right?
And they don't match up very well. So now that I'm looking at it as if it were a movie, I'm kind of examining it in different ways. I'm being a little more harsh in some regard, but they do an easy job, a very early on, easy impression of people. Bad.
What about yourself, Cory? You sticking with this one?
It's gonna be tough. Like I said, it's been difficult for me just to kind of navigate through this world, especially when it seems like the objectives aren't as clear as you want to. I mean, we talk about kind of that Navi focus, where it's that tunnel vision focus, where I feel, we talked about this before too, where it should just be something that almost you want to sweep across the entire screen. I don't want it to just kind of narrow my viewpoint on the screen already, but that's the mechanic they wanted to use, and that's the one they chose. So it does do what it's supposed to do. It just feels like you're kind of limited while doing it, and when you're already in a situation where you're trying to find something in a jungle type environment, it does become difficult to just kind of want to stick with it. So yeah, for me, it's going to be a bit of a war of attrition, I think, to stick with this one. But hearing your guys' experiences farther into the game, it makes you want to kind of continue and see what else they're going to give you here as far as an offering.
No, I think the story sets everything up to kind of get you going, but when, like you say, once you get out into the world, right, it's this beautiful, lush world, but as you mentioned, Cory, like a lot of it just looks the same. So when it's just jungle, jungle. Then you get into the tribes, and you're doing stuff for the tribes, and you're building trust with these tribes, these characters, which then gives you rewards, and then you're like flying later on, right, with your Ikron, and it is like the flying is where things opened up for me. But it's that tunnel vision. As I spend more time looking, panning around, it's kind of like, when you're in VR and your movement goes like this, it shrinks in so you don't get the motion sickness with everything else. That is what this is. I'm like, what am I doing? I might as well put on a VR headset and jump around in this world, right? Because all I do is I spend 90% of my time with this vision up trying to figure out where to go, because there's no breadcrumb trail to lead you to it. I had one objective right early on in the game. You go up to this mountain, and you're supposed to jump over the one way. I went the other way. And then I pull up the map, with which the map sucks. The map is horrible. It is one of the worst maps I've ever seen in a very long time. Very frustrating for me. Because when you zoom in, you feel like you should still zoom in 2 or 3 more levels yet. And I'm so far out, I can't see where I'm going. And the fog is thick. And I like always to unveil the fog itself, right? It's kind of cool. But then there's a dot here and a dot there and a dot here and a dot here. And I'm going, okay, but if I could zoom in a little bit more, I'd have a better understanding of where I'm supposed to go.
Yeah, I want to touch on that vision thing as well. My biggest gripe with that, again, because of like the tunnel vision, is obviously using it to identify where the mech robots are or the enemy are. But I find it didn't stay highlighted enough, because when you take your finger off the right bumper, it disappears. So then you have to keep pushing it to identify him. And playing co-op with you, Drew, how many times did I say, "Hey, Drew, where are you?" And you say, "I'm right behind you," because you're blue. Because you're blue. And when you got a blue colour mixed in with all this green shrubbery, I could not see you. And then when I sort of use my vision, what colour are you? Green.
I'm green.
He's like, green. And he's like, "Where are you, Joe? I'm right behind you." So that was one of my biggest gripes on that vision. And then I think another mechanic I didn't like was to replenish your health for your food.
Yeah, it's a bit of work.
Because you use your left bumper, obviously, to get your weaponry up, but then you have to scroll over to get your food. And when you sort of in one of the missions where you're actually on the oil refineries and it's just full of mech robots and you're by yourself, it's one we did as a co-op, Drew. I just kept dying and dying because all of a sudden they're firing rocket launchers at you, and all you've got is a bow and arrow and a machine gun that hardly does any damage.
Yep, absolutely. Well, guys, that was it's an early impressions for kind of all of us, right? Even 25 hours in doesn't give us a lot of time. For me, I'm going to wrap up with this with a 7.5. It's close, but it's just not perfect, and it's got a bunch of features I'm just not all that happy with at the end of the day. Cory, where are you going with your score?
You know what, Drew? I'm just a little bit lower than you. I think the visuals and the audio are really what's going to carry you through this game. If you're a fan of the Avatar franchise, I think there's going to be a lot here to enjoy. If you're just a fan of these types of games, I think you may find it not to be the most refined version in this genre, but at the same time, it is a serviceable game. It is good, but I'm going to give it a 6.5. What are you going to give it, Scott?
Yeah, my issue here is the only with some of the Ubisoft things that have kind of popped up in every Ubisoft game. So it's not necessarily a complaint in that regard, just something to pay mind to. The visuals in this game are absolutely the best, but also the hardest part of this game for me. And I have to, a little bit of that is I have visual impairment. There is an issue there. So it's not necessarily a problem with the game, it is more my problem. I'm there with a 7. I think this is a great game, very memorable if you're a fan of Avatar.
Yep. Well, I'm scoring this one a 7.5. Everything we touch about visually, the voice acting, the ambience with the background music was on par. But for me, I wasn't keen on the game mechanics. The exploration I found very slow, as it only, like Drew said, it only takes about 10 hours before you can actually get something. You can actually fly to your waypoints and get somewhere. So that's why.
No, that makes a ton of sense, right? I think the more we played, the better things got, but it still took so long. You only have a short window to get people in. So if you're not going to pull them in within 3 hours, that's a problem. So, yeah. The men in blue, the boys in blue, the girls in blue are here. It's Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora.
Good to see you, Storm.